here. Any, if any one of the conditions weren't here, it's very likely, we wouldn't be here either. Like, obviously, the building wasn't here, we wouldn't be here. If somebody didn't have an idea to start the center, that none of us would be here. Things like that. But then you just think about all the other things, all the different things that had to happen for each one of you to be here. It's amazing how interdependent we are with all conditions. It isn't just us deciding, just out of nowhere. It's a whole bunch of things that have happened throughout time that allow this moment to take place in the way it is taking place. And that's pretty astonishing. And so if we think about how, if this moment's a moment of relative peace for you, or a moment of anxiety for you, or a moment of, like, oh yeah, my partner said we had to go for you, whatever kind of moment it might be, that you're pretty safe right now. You probably have had some food today, if or not, but that's probably your choice, not somebody else's choice. That we have, a kind of comfortable environment, not the best chairs in the world, but hey, I'm sitting on a cushion. So, which is much more comfortable. Just a hint. So this is what, the interdependence of these conditions, the fact that nothing happens without it being a wild variety of conditions that have to happen. You think about all the vehicles y'all took to get here, and all the things that had to happen for those vehicles to be built, and all that had to happen for those vehicles to have fuel, and all that had to happen for those vehicles to get here safely, and all, and just on and on and on it goes. And we're all interconnected with that. Yet we see ourselves as independent, totally, self-directed. We're somehow in charge of our moments of our day. And to a certain extent, we are, of course. But we depend upon all these other things coming together for any moment in our lives to happen. You think about, how'd your parents meet? How random is that? So all of these things, fit together in some way, and that, we're here at this moment now. So we can either recognize, wow, these are pretty good conditions I'm in, or we can go, really not for me, and change your conditions, change it. But being happy about the fact that we have opportunities, that we're safe, that we're fed, that we have clothes, that we, whatever, that even though the world has countless problems, and that each of us have our own stuff going on in our own worlds that isn't always pleasant, it doesn't change the fact that at this moment we're safe, comfortable, we can be at ease. So we want to try to check in with our minds to make sure we're taking advantage of that, because we're not always at ease. Our conditions aren't always where you can just feel safe and comfortable and confident with your own ability to handle whatever's going on or take care of whatever's going on, So when we do have those moments, it's just nice to remember that, oh, Things are pretty good right at this second. That's good. Especially if you're one who tends to worry. Or always constantly be thinking of the to-do list or, whatever. So this is ways of getting some rest in your daily life when you just notice nothing's happening right now that I can't handle. And I appreciate that. Hello, those at home. I just finally got the right view on my screen to see you. All righty. So now we want to take a moment to just, you said you were meditating on compassion before, so take a moment to think about all the people in the world that are not having this kind of moment at this time, this instant, that they're having a terrible moment with lots of fear, lots of strife, perhaps hunger. So we want to make sure we want to use our time that's luxurious well, because there are a lot out there who don't have that kind of time. So we wanted to make it meaningful. And y'all showed up to some place that you're kind of like going, okay, I'm exploring some sort of way to connect on a spiritual level with the world. So we're going to read the four immeasurables, which is on page 34 of the old book. These are the four immeasurable minds. So we're trying to create the mind of compassion, the immeasurable mind of compassion, of love, of joy, and others' joy, and equanimity. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And don't forget that when we say all sentient beings, that includes you. That's a wish for yourself and all sentient beings to have happiness. And then compassion. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. This is that natural wish we have when we see someone who suffers, that they be free of it. We need to develop this for ourselves as well. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. This is the wish, that everyone is in a state of joy and that we can be joyful about their joy as opposed to what other things might we be? Jealous. Is that what you said? Yes, jealous. We're like, wish I had that, whatever. As opposed to just feeling the joy, what is it? Vicariously, something. Okay. And then equanimity. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. This one's actually, when you practice, equanimity is the place you start. It's from equanimity that we can have immeasurable compassion or love or joy. That without equanimity, we leave people out. We have a habit of only wishing things that we think people deserve. And so that causes, it's like maybe if we wish for people to be happy, and that's a better place to start than, wishing that people get theirs. So, all right. And we're going to read yes, please.
The second part here where it says free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. It's a tough one.
It's a very tough one.
And I guess the question I would have is, what are some things we could do to free ourselves from attachment for friends or hatred for enemies?
We will talk. That is sort of the subject of discussion for today.
Okay.
You just came here at the right time, right moment, right everything. Before we do that, for those of us who are Buddhists, we're going to recite the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer that's on page 98. And of course, only recite this if you're comfortable. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So try to set a personal motivation for your time this morning. Just something like, oh, I wanted to come because of whatever your reason for showing up. Try to set an intention to use this time well based on that reason. So we've been looking at sort of the jobs of a bodhisattva. So what's a bodhisattva again? I always give pop quizzes. Sorry about that. Bodhisattva is not an enlightened being, not yet. Yep, Luke. Roy. Yes, thank you. That's the key piece, that last piece, who wants to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. A bodhisattva is someone who has that mind 24/7 without effort, just spontaneously, that's the way they think, and it influences everything they think. Most of us probably aren't there. I don't know about you, but I'm not there yet. So what we're studying is trying to learn, how do you get there? It's like, how do you have, less attachment for friends and no hatred for enemies? How do we do that? Because that's what it takes to have these universal, immeasurable minds of love and compassion for everybody, no matter how they act. Now, what does that bring to? Sometimes people panic at that thought. What kind of worries might arise?
Sometimes we're so attached to our resentment, right? If you have, let's say, a particular challenging relationship in some form, we could get very attached to our feelings to that, right? So, what would it be like if I was to be able to let that go?
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? Does anybody have children? Yeah. And when they, kind of start growing up and you have to kind of go, oh, I guess this is their decision. It's no longer my decision what they decide to do. It's really difficult to back off, to just trust that, that your love for them, that if they get in trouble or whatever, they'll come back to you. They need your help. But that, that you can't protect them from everything. You can't, in fact, you pretty much can't protect them from anything. And, it's kind of scary. So all you can do is teach them the best you can about, how to live in the world. And that's sort of what Buddhists try to do. They try to guide us in how we might choose to act, but we get to choose. They can't make us do it. They can't get in our heads and scrub around and go, get rid of this, but they can guide us. But they don't drop their affection or love or compassion or any of these things for us when we don't listen. So I was listening to a teaching yesterday by Jack Kornfield, who's in the Theravadan tradition. But he also studied at Naropa Institute with Trumpa Rinpoche. Yeah, Trumpa Rinpoche. Can't even pronounce it. Anyway, who was sort of a, notorious teacher back in the 70s, but was very, very bright, wrote wonderful books, and had students like Pema Chodron follow him. So, so someone asked him in a class one day at Naropa, does Buddhism have anything like the idea of the grace from God? Does everybody have a sense of God's grace, what that might mean to people, to themselves or whoever? Because I think that's a very personal kind of notion of God's grace. So the students were asking, do you have anything, is there anything in Buddhism? And his response was patience. And I thought that was really an interesting response. This ability to just be patient and love someone, care for them without expectation. Like letting a child learn something that they're having trouble with without intervening, like, oh gosh, let me just do it for you. It's taking too much time. That sometimes we just do something for someone because, would make them happy in that moment. No deserving is required. I just thought it was interesting. So in Buddhism, patience is what? Another pop quiz question. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Well, it is a virtue. Do you know what it is? What is your idea of what it is?
The ability to take harm without retaliating.
The ability to take harm without retaliating. The way they phrase that is accepting the suffering that arises in your own mind without any wish to retaliate. So it's an acknowledgement that it's a moment of difficulty, and that moment of difficulty, you're meeting that moment with patience. I thought that was a very interesting description of grace. Anyway, food for thought. And that's a practice we really want to develop when we're trying to lessen our negative habits, is we want to have patience with ourselves. Where like that fierce attachment arises, or fierce anger arises, or even just fierce impatience arises. And we kind of go into our mind and go, okay, I am suffering in this moment, but I'm not going to retaliate. What does that mean for ourselves when we're using it for ourselves? What can you imagine that could look like? Yes.
So what I feel is that okay, I'm just not reacting. I'm just kind of just nothing, not equal, just not reacting.
That's the not retaliating. It's just not reacting to how you're feeling, to what's arising for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Elaine, did you have something to add to that?
I had a situation actually last night where somebody kind of caught me off guard, was like defensive with me. I didn't mean anything with them. I don't think they even thought about their response to me. I didn't say anything. Normally I would be all like, well,
So some sort of reaction, you had some sort of reaction.
It was
to what they said.
internal. It was internal. I didn't react because, at least from practicing Dharma, I'm learning to
Okay.
give it space and wait. But
Okay, so
there's
this
still
is the
a part
next
of me-
question.
There's still a part of me that's like, that says, are you letting somebody walk all over you? Are
Okay.
you letting someone?
That-
Okay.
That's one fear that arises, isn't it? That if we don't act on this suffering mind that's just arisen, that someone else is taking advantage of us. And that's not good. Is it true? Well, you have to, fine. So we have to understand that. It's not enough to just say, well, that's because I'm thinking of the I.
Also, if you take a moment to examine what's going on, take the I out of the decision.
Okay, so one thing that you can do is take a moment to see where the I is in your reaction, where that self-interest is, what is, like I'm being taken advantage of, or they're being rude to me and I shouldn't allow people to be rude to me. I don't know how your words go.
I remember children saying that it's called simmering.
Yeah, that's kind of like that resentment. It's resentment, sort of like when it goes to a full boil. Now you resent that. so it's yeah. So, but okay, so if we are accepting the harm that's arisen in our mind and not retaliating towards our reaction. In other words, we've become indignant, say. Well, gee, that was unexpected. That was rude. Whatever our reaction is, boy, that wasn't nice. Or, I don't know, I'm hurt. So how do we not retaliate for ourselves for having that mind?
What's wrong with me?
That's a retaliation, isn't it? Oh, there I am losing my patience again. What an idiot. What is another way?
Removing yourself from the situation, like walking in another room, or
okay, we're talking about how how do we retaliate against ourselves? When we retaliate against another person, are we happy?
No.
Do we suffer? So that's a form of retaliation against ourselves as well. So it's not just that when we I said that easily, retaliate towards someone else that they get harmed, we also get harmed, because none of these are pleasant states of mind. The mind that feels hurt isn't pleasant. The mind,
the other person is suffering also.
when do you know that? When do you know when somebody else is suffering?
Just by the state that they're in.
Yeah, okay. So they say something nasty. Are they happy?
No.
No. It's actually kind of obvious. If you know that you say mean things when you're unhappy or afraid or whatever your theme in your life is, then you could bet that that's true for them as well. Doesn't mean they're working on it. That's another thing about acceptance of the suffering. It's accepting where somebody else is. Does this mean you can never have a conversation with someone to describe, like, I didn't really like how that conversation went. Was there something going on with you, or is it just, but you want to, if you act in that moment, you don't give yourself enough space for all these things to arise, to like, oh, okay, I wonder what's going on with them. And if I hear just the words, are they really attacking me? If I look again at what was said, is it really an attack? Because oftentimes we feel attacked when we're not, when somebody else may be just busy, somebody else may just not be skillful with their speech. They may not have great social skills, things like that. But we need to understand that for us to make progress on not acting from our negative states of mind, we need to practice patience with ourselves so that when those minds arise, we don't just immediately want to hurt ourselves or someone else, retaliate in either direction. Yeah.
I wonder why that's a natural inclination, meaning, when we start to practice these ways of thinking, it's effort, and it's, I'd like to say unnatural, because I don't want to say unnatural. It takes effort, right? And awareness. But people who just react, which is most of the people around us, right?
How about you?
Of course.
Okay, then you don't have to know about anybody else. You can just say me.
Okay, me. So I wonder why is it, that we're just blind responses sometimes?
What do you think? Maybe to protect ourselves.
Like flight versus fight.
Fight or flight, which is pretty instinctive, in the sense of we are vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's a fact. We also have a tendency to go towards the negative. And they meaning like psychologists and people who study these things, they say it's from being, this need to spot danger and then protect yourself from it. Yeah. So it's a perceived survival mechanism. However, we're not living in the jungles anymore. Yes, Anne.
I got fight, flight, and flirt.
Yeah, fight, flight, or flirt response. Yeah, I think that's when do you develop that? It's a survival technique. How can I, change this energy? Something. Yeah. I mean, it's just. But again, it's like it's coming from a place of vulnerability that may not need protection the way in which we think of protection. We close our hearts instead of opening our hearts. But, we feel it's like I'm hurt or they're rude, however our response is, and then it's like, so I'm not going to care about this person. Yep.
Sometimes I just feel I'm right.
I never feel that. Yeah, our sense of I'm right. Yeah. So we all have different versions of this, right? I was big into fairness growing up. I had two brothers, just, like life didn't seem fair at all, kind of attitude.
The fight or flirt idea is something that's kind of offering something good as opposed to reacting with something harsh.
Yeah.
I have my friend and I've been planning on getting together, and he said, no, we can't do it. So I have the opportunity to complain how terrible you are. Instead, why don't I offer him an idea, or what would you like?
Right. Yeah, these are what could take place instead if we leave the door and our heart open. However, we have to develop an attitude. We have to work at not caring if we're right. You know, what does that mean anyway? Who are we kidding anyway? You know, so it's really about thinking about these things, you know, later perhaps when we have more time, about sitting down going, okay, but I was right, and thinking about what does that mean? What's the value of being right? And you look at it in reference to that situation. Is it useful? Does it matter? 3 months from now, will I remember? Will I care? Will I? And if the answer is what I'll care about is being perceived as wrong, that's, you know, getting to another layer, you know, that we want to be perceived as whatever, knowledgeable, clever. I don't know.
Doesn't
So-
it usually cause more problems when you prove you're right?
Oh, especially if you can prove you're right. Proving yourself right's really tricky, isn't it? I've done it my whole life. So yes, this is another way that we slap ourselves in the face in our attempt to be perceived in some way that we approve of, you know, that we respect, you know. And we're slapping ourselves in the face because that the energy that's behind that wish to be right isn't for purely academic reasons. It is what's going on if you want to prove you're right? What's the other person involved? Wrong. You're wrong. So you have to look at what effect that has. Especially if you make it a big deal, right? You know, when there's a lot of, you know, I mean, how many women have been given, you know, the little kitchen towel or the, you know, what was that? I thought I was marrying Mr. Right. I didn't know that just meant he, you know, thought he was always right. Whatever it is, you know, there are all these little things. Men may not have seen them, but, you know, women get them as gifts. And they're equal ones for women. So not just the women. But, you know, we have to understand that this is like attachment to our, you know, view as, you know, and feeling like it is necessary that view prevail. And being attached to a view, that's how we got a title of a book. What is it? We meet the Buddha in the road, kill him. That's what that's about. It's attachment to a view. You know, like if you don't believe, if you're not Buddhist, you're wrong.
The view of ourselves
Yes.
that we have is, why do we have this self-loathing that always strives to be right when in
Reasons. Can you imagine all the different things that have to come together? The cultural things, the way we're raised, our dislike of being vulnerable, you know, our wanting to always be right. If you always want to be right, you have ample opportunity to not be there. You know, oh, I always get it wrong. I always get it, you know, then you can just go the opposite direction. There's no, when we are caught up in labels like self-loathing, you know, you have that other thing of like arrogance, you know, because when we become that negative thing or that good thing, we get attached to that. So it's a misperception of how we are. It comes back to this misunderstanding of how we exist. You know, we really want to go down a list, a very concrete list of good qualities and whatever else you want to call them, you know, and go tick, I have that, I have that, I have that. No, I don't have this one. I'm not impatient. I'm not bitchy. I'm not, you know, whatever. You know, we have these things like as if we are fixed in time and we're just one thing. And when we miss the mark, you know, we failed. Well, it's a ludicrous way to try to be. Because none of us can live up to a standard that says I have to always be right, that I always have to be nice, that I always have to be kind, that I always have to be whatever. Yes.
You don't get that part. You always look for outside the people or things to blame.
Right. Because we don't want it to be about us in that moment. We want everything else to be about us, but not those moments. So you see, it's this roller coaster. So we need to understand the disadvantages of thinking that way. Like the disadvantage of holding on to wanting to be right, or feeling, or even holding on to the idea, I know I was wrong. And then the second idea, and others should know it. So it's like a two-parter, you know. And then this idea that there's somebody to blame. If it's not right, somebody's to blame. And self-loathing usually takes it in the form of I'm to blame. You know. And then we, you know, and neither is helpful. That's the biggest aspect of this, is blame is not helpful. Go ahead.
If the true self.
What is this true self?
Well, if that space where there is pure, I don't know how to.
No, there's no true self. That's the whole point. All we are, I was reading this too, is a process. We're just a series of moments. Now, we can decide we're naturally this way or that, but is that true? And can we change? So we may have a habit of having self-loathing, for example, but we can change that habit. It takes effort, and it takes being aware of every moment that you do it and kind of going, oh, that's not necessary. You know, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
Instead of I can't believe I
Instead of I can't believe I did it. Yes. You know, but it's all this talk as if there is this thing called myself, my true self, that is permanent, unchanging. That is a mistake we make, that we grasp onto that and say, I am this, or I'm not that. And we go back and forth all the time. And we do it with other people. We resent them. You know, we blame them. We blame others and events for our unhappiness. And that's actually just a misunderstanding of how we exist. So when we can notice what's going on with ourselves and respond with patience, you know, going, oh, I really don't want to retaliate against this person for saying something unkind to me, because I don't want to be that kind of person. So in this moment, I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to respond. And in fact, I'm going to turn my mind towards the other and say, what's going on with this person? But instead of holding on to some image of ourselves that we have to live up to or not live up to, it just wears us out. So how do we shift this idea of attachment for friends and hatred for enemies? So attachment has a very specific meaning. So attachment is what? Huh? Well, that's craving or covetousness, which name I can't pronounce. Attachment means exaggerating the good qualities of something and then desiring to have it. But it's an untruth. It's an exaggeration. So it doesn't mean the same thing as the word attachment we use in psychology. There's healthy attachment to your children. There's healthy attachment, It's not about that. It's about this. And we do it to ourselves. We have an image of ourselves we're attached to. And then if we grasp after it, and if something happens and we fail to live up to it, we crumble. A hatred is that wish to do harm. So those are very specific meanings, and there are all sorts of degrees of that, right? We might have a slight attachment to certain things, but we can live without it. We're not really all that's concerned. And then we get obsessed about certain things. We develop addictions to certain things, so it gets all out of control. So working on not having attachment for things we like, that's what friends means, people we like. And not having hatred for things we don't like, people who we don't like, that we find difficult. And that also has varying degrees. It means something different in a war zone, But it's this ability to recognize that no matter what the circumstances are, these are people. We're talking about people with minds who wish to be happy and don't wish to suffer. And we're all struggling to figure out how to do that. So people go to war over these things. And we think that it just is, that it's something more rational than that, or somehow instead of at the heart of it, it's I want something and I don't care how I get it. And we've all been known to do that on these little tiny scales that have nothing to do with war, but we'll manipulate situations to be able to do what we want to do, not what the partner wants to do, or not what the kids want to do. We'll just kind of sometimes just take control, say, no, we're not doing that. I'm the boss, kind of thing. But it comes down to this idea that we think, what is the basic thing that we're thinking with attachment and hatred? You want it different with what?
Just different.
Yeah, either one. We want to always have things we're attached to around us. We want access to it all the time. And we want to have zero access, never worry about bumping into what we don't like. Why? I'm sorry. We avoid being uncomfortable. Why?
It'll make us happy.
We think it's going to make us happy. We think never getting what we don't want and always getting what we do want will make us happy. Why do we think that?
For a while, it does. For a while, okay.
because we live in what the Buddha would say, the desire realm. So we have all these sensory, experiences, where we feel good physically, or we have these, uplifting thoughts in our hearts or something with, like, oh, somebody loves us or something, and so that makes us feel good. So we have all these things that actually cause a physical response. And so very temporarily, very fleetingly, we have these responses and we go, oh yeah, so getting what I want makes me happy. Again, this comes back to this idea of an I, and this body that we have to meet the needs of, that we have to protect at all cost. And this gets us into trouble. I mean, let's face it, for most of us to get what we want takes many years of effort, doesn't it? Like to get the job you like. It doesn't just happen, to get a relationship that's good. It doesn't just happen. It's not just about physical attraction, And even, because again, because it is this physical thing, it's very temporary. But it's this idea that things can be made permanent. We're mistaken about that. It cannot be made permanent.
Again, I have this vision of this space of no attachment and the space of no hatred, and that I can come back to. Because if I don't have that, what do I have? And then if I'm not attached, if I don't dislike and hate, what?
You have peace.
So that space is.
So that's peace. And the mind naturally goes towards that. If we're not feeding it with cravings, if we're not feeling it with aversion, if we're not feeling it with these basic things of anger, impatience, not getting what I want, or I have to get what I want. I mean, if you look at your day and think of what's your mind is on, and you realize it's constantly chasing something, either chasing something you want or trying to get away from something you don't want, then you're in a state of craving all the time. Do addicts look like they're having a good time?
Sometimes.
When
They're doing
in that very brief moment, in the movies where they show you somebody getting their hit of heroin or crack cocaine or something, I don't know, and they have this moment that they just fog over, how long does that last?
about 3 seconds.
It's really interesting. It's just like, it's like, and that look, I mean, it doesn't look desirable, but of course it's not really happening because I'm just watching the movie. I'm not actually in some place where they're doing that. But I mean, the like the image of the opium den, the past, it's just, so the peace of mind that comes from no attachment, no aversion, doesn't look like that. And I can imagine that we are very attached to sensory desire. We like parts of the up and down. We even like roller coasters, like literally, we like that physical feeling of going, that, being a little bit scared, but not too much, that whole thing, and we watch scary movies for the same reason, it's just like, oh, a little bit too much. And of course, also knowing you're safe, that's important, so, and that's our addiction to the sensory aspect of our world. That's the desire realm. We're totally enmeshed in it. And we've created the cause for it. This is how we learn, because we keep doing it. We keep chasing after this little bit of, a little bit of that, but you want to look at and so you don't actually know what peace is, where you're just okay. So the more that we can take those moments to notice, oh, everything about this moment is okay. I'm not stressed. Yeah.
Is peace emptiness?
Is what?
Peace emptiness.
No, it's emptiness is a quality of all phenomena. So emptiness means empty of something. You know, we don't, it's not just, you're not just empty. We're not talking about cups that are empty. You know, it's empty of existing inherently, which means from its own side that somehow I am tendering. There is a thing almost, there's a essence of tendering that exists, you know, and that you can contact in some superficial way. You know, things don't actually exist like that. There is no moment that all of a sudden I'm just tendering. You know, when a baby's born, is that the first moment? No, they were around. And at the moment right before that fertilized egg happens, what are they? Oh.
Consciousness.
Yeah, they are, but only from the perspective in Buddhism where we say that your mind never ceases to exist. It just goes from body to body to body. And an enlightened mind doesn't have to change bodies. It can just, you know, if it decides to be helpful for you to manifest here as Shakyamuni Buddha, it can. But it doesn't need a body like that. And it's a state of bliss. It's not a state of boredom. It's not a state of calm that has that tension of boredom. There's no boredom in the mind of an enlightened being. Boredom comes from what?
Desire.
Desire. I want something else. I want it to be different, you know? So we need to really respect how powerful desire is and whether it leads us to good things or not. It's nothing wrong with liking things. Desire that we're talking about here, this level of craving, is stronger than that. It's a goes beyond liking. It's an exaggerated sense of the goodness of something, of the pleasantness of something, of the delight of something, and really putting onto it a layer of inherent existence. It is that way.
So desire is not good for the happy. It creates that the sadness in us.
Yes, it's
So, but the desire and question, can desire, fuel the growth in a human? Like, can it create a healthy ambition?
yeah, you can have, yeah, it's not about, you know, just, how do I put this? It's why they call it like craving and grasping. So it's those two states of mind where you want something, but then you grasp after it like it has to exist for me to be happy. You know, it's like one thing to have goals and work towards those goals. It's another thing to consider it a total disaster if it doesn't work out. And then you're never happy again. You know, and many of us have memories where we think, I wish I had, we did this, could be 40 years ago. I wish I had never started smoking. And I still really wish I had never started smoking. Okay, get over it.
So desire and having goals are two different things, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's that. This is why this idea of attachment and aversion is important. This idea, it's an exaggeration of something. It's like, oh, I've got to have this. And really meaning that I have to have this. And it can take, it doesn't have to be something short-term. It can be very long-term. People who have long-term goals, and they never reach them. Or people who just, as soon as they reach them, have a new long-term goal, so that there's always chasing. It's that energy of the chase, because that has that element of there's something I need. And the mind actually doesn't need anything.
Really?
Yeah.
So, so can we say that as a mankind, we used to live in a jungle with other animals and we were big animals, but there was that desire that pushed out of the jungle.
Okay, so Buddhism doesn't hold that to be the case. You know, like all those animals in the jungles were human beings at some other point.
Right.
They're all beings with minds. And we just, you know, until we get our act together, you know, we kind of, who knows what our body will be. If we die in a moment of intense craving, you know, we might be, I don't know, a leech.
Good.
You know, so, you know, and then that doesn't take too long. Yeah. It's kind of a shock, isn't it? So fortunately, a leech's life isn't too long. But we want to practice the mind that we're okay with. When we're having, if we keep practicing minds that do this, that develop this craving mind, I've gotta have it, it's too important, blah, 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 ad nauseum. That's where we end up. We call them hungry ghost. You know, they end up in a realm, instead of the desire realm, they're in the hungry ghost realm where they can't get anything they want. They can't find food, they can't find drink, they can't, you know, there's just nothing working for them. You know, and that doesn't last forever either. None of these things last forever because we're not inherently any of these things. We are not stuck.
So the evolution just
No, not in the way that it's taught. I mean, it exists in these bodies are you know, part of the condition for these bodies is evolution. This particular body on this planet, but our minds joining this body at the time of that egg and sperm fertilizing each other. That's not quite how it works, but you know what I mean. When consciousness enters that egg, that consciousness is from anywhere in anywhere. If there are 15 parallel plates of something, you know, who knows? You know,
wow.
it is a wow. It's a big view. So you don't even have to get yourself caught up in that. It's this idea that habits of mind develop through habit. So if we practice one kind of mind all the time, or even a multiple minds that are perfectly suffering minds, guess what? We keep going with that mind. You know, this idea that babies have clean slates, so to speak, there's nobody out there judging. You know, we bring certain habits with us. You see that in your children. They kind of different, even though they have the same, you know, kind of similar genetic kind of makeup, but they're not the same. And it's because they're minds and their circumstances in that life. You know, so all of these coming together, you know. But the main thing is, it's like, you don't have to worry about future life. I mean, you can. I mean, it's a good idea, you know, because if it turns out to be true, you're going to want to care about whether you're a leech in that next life. But it's you suffer now with those minds. So even if you can't get your head around this Buddhist worldview, the fact is we suffer from these kinds of grasping minds that are mistaking everything. You know, it's like when someone insults you. I mean, I remember thinking about this at all, you know, and they've insulted me. What are the odds they were really thinking about you?
50-50.
I'm not even sure it's that much. You know, when you're kind of going through your day, not with people, not with your partners or, you know, but even sometimes even with your partner, you know, you say something, you don't think about the other person at all. Well, that's true when they talk to you. You know? You think? Yeah, probably. But we think we're the most important person in the universe. So when someone speaks to us, it's got to be about us. And it's not true. We're not the most important person in anybody's universe except our own mind. you know. And that's why we so appreciate people who seem to always be thinking of others. The way they, you know, the way they enter a room, the way they talk to people, it's like, wow, they really listen to others. Yeah, most of us don't have that skill. So we want to, you know, take note. Those people usually don't look too sad, you know, because these interactions with each other, interactions with nature, interactions with beings, you know, living things, enriches us. And the more pleasant they are, the more we actually make connection, you know, where it's not just idle talk, but where you actually have a shared moment, where you can feel the sameness in that moment, that you're both reacting a certain way, the more meaningful it all is. You know, so it behooves us, is that a word? To think of others and to work on that, and to not get all caught up in what people are saying to us, but be more cognizant of what we're saying to others. You know, how we're, you know, that direction. Elaine, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, my question is mind or consciousness, but behind all our garbage, is the mind basically pure, or like soul or essence, or I don't know what it is.
No, that's grasping onto the mind as being the thing.
So what is it?
It's consciousness. It's all our mental events.
And that's it? And that's it?
When you think about how much you worry about what's in your mind, yes, that's it.
The end. Okay.
Well, where's joy? Where's anything?
Mhm.
It's a mental experience. This is why it's so important to work on the mind, because it really isn't an external experience. I mean, you've ever had an opportunity to experience something that you normally just love, but you're too distracted to notice it. You're just too, because your mind is not there. It's the mind that's the key. It's not the desire-wound body that we have. It's not that we can't feel good. It's not that we don't have preferences. It's not all that kind of stuff. But as soon as we have a moment of pleasure, we want to grab it and keep it going. You know?
And we call that disturbing emotion too.
Yeah, that's a disturbing emotion. Liking is not a disturbing emotion. It's this craving for it, this exaggeration, this attachment to it that is exaggerating either the goodness or the badness of something. That's what our aversion is. It's just that attachment to being separated to what we don't like. If we yes.
Isn't there a difference between mind and consciousness?
No.
No?
No.
So, but we could lose ourselves, like you were describing, like we could be enjoying something, but we're not present because our minds are moving so fast.
All the same mind.
But being aware of that mind, of what the thoughts are, isn't that separate?
No.
No.
It's just your mind is awareness. You don't need another mind to be aware. It's more of just being able to listen to that awareness.
With your awareness.
With your awareness. It's all the same awareness. I know it just seems like, you know, but our minds, they say, Buddhism says, what is it? Finger snap. In the time of a finger snap, there's 65 thoughts.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And psychology says that every single day we have anywhere between 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts in a 24.
I want to know who's counting them.
And it also says that 80% of them are negative thoughts.
Yep. Yep. And they're made up. We make everything up.
Yeah, correct.
We fill in all the gaps. You know how your eyeball fills in the gap of that center spot that's doesn't see anything? You aware of that? Do we have the little round spot dot, and it doesn't, so our brain just fills it in, you know? The brain and the mind are not the same thing in Buddhism. The brain is a physical support for the mind. A human brain is really a good physical support for the mind. Mosquito brain, not so much. But the mind is the mind. So consciousness and the mind, sure, there are different level, we have moments when we're not paying attention to what we're thinking. And what happens then often?
Crash.
We crash. Or we drop something, we don't do something right, or we don't notice that our kids just run out in the street because we're focusing on something else, So yeah, there's a lot to take in, but we do take in a lot. It's amazing, the capacity of the mind, and we don't use it. And according to Buddhism, the mind doesn't need to be all snug in this little body. It's much more expansive than that. An enlightened mind is everywhere. It's not restricted by anything.
I have a question. I was listening to this podcast this week about neuroscientists talking about a research that they did with positive interactions, especially social interactions, and that we carry that with us. So I'm wondering, how does Buddhism see that?
Say that again.
So I don't know exactly how they measure it. So the scientist was saying that part of the good mental health is interacting with people that leave you with a positive mind or positive interaction. So you're not ruminating, so you're not leaving that.
So
place.
part of what is what? So
Part of having a healthy mental health.
part of having well-being.
Yes.
Healthy mental thing is good interactions with people.
Yes.
Where
avoiding interactions that leave you ruminating or questioning.
So the interaction with people that's also healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I think my question.
They measure brain activity now. They see what part lights up, and they figured out, like from the early days in the 70s when they were measuring meditator monks brain, and had them go through their meditative stages and and they would just indicate when they'd enter a new level of absorption. And they were able to track things like when they were thinking about compassion and what would light up and blah blah blah, and then they've expanded that through technology today, so it's just all over the place.
Today, like a watch like this, it looks at a few parameters to figure out the state of mind.
Yeah, but we're still in the beginning stages.
Correct.
Yeah, and also the brain is not the mind. So we can train the mind that will have impacts on the brain. That's what's interesting.
I'd like to ask if Gladys had an opportunity to ask her question, because I'm curious.
Well, so I think the question was, does that mean if I'm in the presence of someone
Right.
that has that mind,
Right.
even there is a therapy now called polyvagal therapy,
Yes.
where you sit next to each other and you just interact and you calm the other person's nervous system. So I think my question is there such an explanation in Buddhism for that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but it's not complicated. What happens when a happy person comes into a room?
The energy is
That has effects on people, doesn't it? So, and when you're very upset and a friend comes and just sits with you, I mean, these things are not new. What's new is that we're trying to pinpoint exactly, what's going on. And maybe they'll figure it out. I don't know. But
so I think that my thought was, in Buddhism, does that mean that person acquired those habits through
time,
lives, right? And they bring that, and I don't know,
that skill with them. Well, their skill. It's a skill. Compassion can be taught. It's something we can learn. We have the basis, which is our compassion we already have. And then through working on equanimity and trying to expand that compassion out to people like you don't know, or then, finally to people that you don't like. And then finally to people who you would call your enemy. You know, that this, just a second, this is a process of recognizing that we stop short of those things. You know, that we realize that we have compassion for this situation because we like the people involved. You know, we tend to have compassion for children no matter where they are if we see something about them that causes them suffering because they're little people, you know? So we have that compassion. But then we see jerks acting out and we don't look at their suffering. We just want to get away from them. You know, so it's a matter of learning that mentally we don't have to separate ourselves from someone else to be safe. Mentally, we can include them in our circle of concern. You know, mentally we can care about their level of suffering or their level of joy. Doesn't mean we necessarily do anything differently. We just don't practice the habit of hate or aversion. That's what it does for us. Instead of going to, I just wish they'd get out of the way, we can work on wishing them well. You know, direct our mind towards a habit of mind we want to develop, not a habit of mind that we're all probably pretty good at and that makes us suffer. This is not, it's not magic, it's effort. No, it's this recognition that maybe there's some benefit. I mean, this is where we can use our self-interest to help us move along the way. You know, is there some benefit to you to do this? Because feeling angry or disgusted or whatever we're feeling when we're around people we don't like isn't a happy state of mind. It's an unpleasant state of mind. Then holding on to that long after we're with them in that situation and recalling it is an unpleasant state of mind. You know, so we want to, you know, so just recognizing that, why would I want to practice that mind of hate? What do I think's in it for me? Do I really think hating is going to make the world give me what I want? No. I don't think anybody really thinks that. You know, but what do we might think? Yoda here speaking. Okay, you know, we might think that we'll feel good if we make other people know how bad they are. We might think that. You know, let them know just how much of a jerk they are and how undeserving they are of anybody's affection. You know. But if we logically look at that, we might be able to see that that's not likely going to be the outcome. We're not going to feel any better. They might not feel better. They might feel worse. They might not. They might not care what you think. So it's really about recognizing the thing that we have control over is choosing how we think. You know, so a terrible, ugly thought arises, we can go, really don't want to think like that. So let me try to look at this from a different perspective. This is all mental. This is all a mental process. You know, I don't want to respond with ugliness. I don't even want to think anything ugly about this person. So I'm going to think about how they might be suffering, or, you know, recognizing they probably have friends. Not everybody thinks the worst of them, you know, like I do in this moment, you know, whatever. You know, that we actively make friends with them in our mind. That does not mean liking what they're doing. What about you?
They think it's justice.
I don't need your guesses about other people. I want to know about you.
I try to overcome looking at someone.
Right.
And feeling that my compassion, my acceptance of their behavior, because I'm not accepting their behavior.
Right.
I'm having compassion for the fact that they're suffering and whatever damage or evil that I think they're doing, they're creating
More
bad
suffering.
karma and are going to end up in a lower realm.
Yeah. Or if you don't even have to think that. Yeah, exactly. And it's this understanding that, wow, I wouldn't want that mind. When you see someone behaving in a way that you think's abhorrent, imagine the mind of that person. And then rejoice that you don't have that mind. But then you want to work on not creating the cause to have that mind. And anger is the cause for having that kind of mind and doing those kinds of actions. You know? So this is something that we can work on. And fortunately, we can also work on the mind that is just more aware of good conditions, good moments, peaceful moments, and seek them out. You know, it's like most of us have friends that we know wouldn't be the person we call in an emergency. You know, we can seek people out that help our mental health. We can also be helpful to those who aren't in that place, you know, because we can be that person that's sitting next to them, sending out good energy. Or loving energy, or to the wish that they weren't suffering. Because most of the time we can't directly help, but we can be a presence and not, you know, and be a model of behavior that might be more useful. But mostly it's an inner world we're working with. And as soon as we get caught in what we can do to change that other person, what are we doing? What does that action say about what we're doing?
Accepting the person
As where they are, you're also judging them.
Yeah.
And you're deciding that they need to change.
There's something wrong with them.
Well, and all sorts of things, like, and that you know best. My personal favorite. Oh, you know, we don't know. I was looking at something, a cartoon or something where, actually it was on Instagram, where, what was it? Oh,
It's gone.
it's gone. It's gone. It just seems so important.
So should we not, you know, ask people to change if we think is change is in their best interest? And like we are discussing, like you said maybe 40 minutes ago, that change is possible with awareness and effort. And I wrote it down in my thing here.
And hopefully you'll look at it when you need it.
Yeah.
That's not a yeah.
Oh, that's for us, not to.
Right. That's the thing, is that we are so, all this work is our inner work.
I see.
It's not fixing others.
But
By
it's not
fixing,
helping them.
it might help them if you fix yourself, but as soon as you're concentrated on them, what you're doing is blaming them.
I see.
You know, you're not perfect because, you're not happy because, you know, you've got all the answers. I'm great. Look at me. See what I'm doing, you know, blah, blah, blah. Really, sure, there are moments of friendship that we can share, but there's an invitation involved where someone invites us to share. Like they'll say, I've noticed that you seem to have been happier these days. Is there something you're doing? You know? But we need to self-focus on our own issues, our own stuff, so that we can work on our own minds, because we can't fix their minds, you know? So that's the deal. We can only fix our own minds. And it's not a fast process, you know? So. But they do show, I mean, it's interesting today, you know, they are looking at things like putting your hand on your heart, you know, how that we get some sort of comfort from that. It shows up in the brain as, you know, like our comfort zones get lit up or something. So it's not that we are disconnected from our bodies. We are definitely not disconnected from our bodies, you know. So we want to take care of the body. We want to do what's healthy for the body as well as the mind. And use any things we can do to make us feel like we can have the space to take care of our minds. So we have to give ourselves time to do that, you know, breaks in the day where we just quietly reflect or just take a breath. I mean, really, you know, once an hour, if you just breathe and sit up straight and let your shoulders relax, all that stuff helps, you know, and especially that, which we talk about all the time, that hesitation, that pause we take before we say something to someone else, you know, of really just, do I need to say this or not? You know, just asking yourself, you know, what do I think? Why do I think I need to say something? I mean, that can be a fun thing to do, is just, you know, kind of keep a little note card of what, you know, all the things you're thinking about saying and don't say them, and see how many, you know, and then look later. Did you know, just so, you know, because we kind of have, some of us have the habit, I know I have the habit of trying to fix others, and it's not a good plan. You know, because inevitably you have to look in the mirror.
In the September month teaching, you were thinking about the power of pause.
Yeah. It's really useful to just pause. And before we go to self-loathing, to just pause. Is that true? You know, is this self-assessment I'm making, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it, you know, any of those things? Because when you think about it, you know, if we're happier, we treat others better. It's a better habit of mind. So it's just, you know, we want to give ourselves that. We just need to recognize that self-indulgence is not the way to necessarily get it. This idea that, oh, I just need a time alone to myself, you know, I'm not calling anybody this week, you know, that kind of thing.
This keeps coming back to my mind about self-cherishing. Like many times, and I'm thinking maybe I'm just too much self-cherishing, because I don't retaliate most of the time because I don't want to engage, because I don't want to be upset. You know, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm doing for the wrong reasons then.
Well, I think you need to just go one step further, because there is something in it for you.
Right. Not
retaliating or not getting into a confrontation. There's definitely something in it for you. You want to then go further and see what is in it for the two of you, you know, to really understand this interdependence that we have, to understand that there isn't just something in it for you. You know, you really want to, you know, see that how, you know, you don't want to harm someone else, you know, that kind of thing. You know, how can you enrich this moment instead of cause more damage or any damage? You know, because it's always interesting, you know, when we have to confront someone that sort of implies there's someone out there to blame for something I don't like. So it doesn't mean there aren't moments. I mean, people have to have, you know, we don't always know the best way to be with each other, you know, so we do have to work at that. But, you know, and people do abuse other people, you know, and we have to work with that. But it's, you know, in general, you know, I remember one of the qualities of patience is this idea talked about in Buddhism, is this idea that someone's trying to harm you. You know, I remember a teacher asking me, yeah, when was the last time somebody tried to harm you? You know, it actually doesn't happen very often. You really haven't even entered their sphere. They're just, they're just acting from their own stuff. So it's a very, and it's just funny to recognize in myself just how impatient I am with people who are not trying to harm me. And how pitiful that's we have to start where we are and work on it. So anyway. Okay, guys. Sorry, guys at home, there was no one helping you out there. So yes, of course it will help. Somebody was helping you out there. Thank you for that. Anyway, sometimes we have people typing in what y'all say so that the people at home can hear you. Sometimes I remember to repeat it, but not very often. So,
ask last question.
Yep.
So is there any relation between brain and mind?
Yep. No, well, there's a relationship. They're they're dependent on each other. We need the human brain to be able to have the sophisticated way of thinking that we have. That's, so that's the beauty of a human life in this world, is that we can really change our minds. A mosquito can't change its mind, A tiger probably can't do much to change its mind, but we have a really strong support. So it's useful in that way.
So strong support from the brain to the mind.
Well, I mean, it's a physical support for the mind, but it isn't the mind, So this hand can support this hand, but there's still two hands.
So if somebody has an accident or whatever, and the brain doesn't function anymore, the mind is still present.
The mind's there, they just have no access to it. And when the body dies, the mind will move on.
The mind carry the memories from one life to the other.
Yep. Well, we don't remember them, do we? Do you remember yesterday very well?
I know.
I know. It's our distracted, it's our distracted mind that prevents us from all of that and all the other things. So anyway. All right. So let's take a moment to rejoice in our efforts at trying to look at things from a different perspective, or just try to, refresh our memory about, different perspectives and how to, maybe that will help us work on our minds or help us not harm others. And from those positive efforts comes positive results. And so we would like to dedicate them to the benefit of others. So on page 244, first is the Shantideva's prayers. 246. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And prayers for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, on 244. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. So, and then 234, is that right? 234. This is for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who's was our spiritual director, passed away last spring. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children, the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So next Monday night is Medicine Buddha Puja. So please join us. It's for the success of anything, any project, anything for the, end of wars, end of illness, anything. And it's Medicine Buddha Puja. Next Monday night, in a week, after Thanksgiving, the 27th, not tomorrow. I know, I don't get the next and this one right. Okay. So, so please join us if you can. We're not meeting next Sunday. So not next Sunday, but in 2 weeks. Is that it?
Close to the Thanksgiving.
I think that's it. Okay, thank you very much for coming and participating and doing all those things. If anybody want to help empty water bowls, that'd be welcome. That's all I know. Have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable Tendron. Thank you.
Thank you, Tendron.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Sherry.
Bye.
Anna. Bye, Esther. Bye. Grazie.
Bye.
You should empty.
Yep. He can show you what to do.
Okay.
This.